So for our next and final speaker, I've had the pleasure to have known him both professionally and personally. Nicholas Ruklovich was in a motorcycle accident on March 15th, 2016. At INOVA Fairfax Trauma Center and INOVA Mount Vernon Rehabilitation Hospital, he recovered from a shattered orbital crest, a concussion, a subdural hematoma, separated pelvic circle, and a fractured sacroiliac joint. The recovery prognosis was very good, with the support of his medical team and the compassionate community around him, his friends and family. He had to relearn basic life skills like lifting a fork and walking. But the hardest stuff was the emotional toll that the traumatic event had taken on Nicholas. 2 years later, on the outside, it is difficult to see that Nicholas is injured at all. He feels he has become a better version of himself and created a new normal. His experience of this trauma allows him to share about the reactive demands of the recovery process, both for the patient and for those encouraging them. His work with cognitive behavioral therapy to balance stress, attention to detail, and manage the emotional waves that may influence clinicians and patients. He volunteers his time as a mentor at Mount Vernon Inpatient Rehabilitation and as a trauma survivor visitor at Fairfax Hospital. For the 2018 Rehabilitation Conference keynote, he will speak to the audience about the importance of focusing through the feelings of the extension of wellness. Please welcome Nicholas Ruklovich.
Wow, this is an honor. Wow, this is an honor. Thank you. Well, my name is Nicholas Peter Ruklovich, or one time in the ICU, it was Nicolas. But today, as a survivor of a brain injury, I'd like to discuss feelings. No, really. Let's talk about emotions, the maker or breaker of most things in life. You may find emotion to be an unintentional part of any patient's recovery plan. It was one of those major findings through my own accident and mental health journey with cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. I'm grateful to have some of my INOVA friends and my family here today. Thank you, Mommy Megan. Time is such a human construct, a way to measure changes with a common scale. Sometimes a day feels like it drags on for a year, and sometimes a decade passes in a blink of an eye. There's a time before and there's a time after, March 15th. I was in a single vehicle motorcycle accident. As we heard, I suffered a shattered left orbital, massive concussion, right side subdermal hematoma, separated pelvic circle, and a broken sacroiliac. So you could say both physical and neurological trauma. The body is amazing. Shock is one hell of a coping mechanism. But I sure did have some wild dreams while concussed. INOVA not only invited me to present my before pictures at intake, and now my after. And look, there's no lines. They are also part of my family. I was in INOVA Fairfax ICU, where amazing people were able to perform amazing surgeries and set me on a path to healing. Then I was transferred to the inpatient program at Mount Vernon, followed by the outpatient program known as Bridge. Clearly, some exceptional medical techniques were applied to me. There was other presenters here throughout the day, and I'm sure Mr. Hale would have found me to be agitated. Miss Oliver probably can empathize with anybody who has to pull my cell phone from my hand. In ICU, this was my cell phone. Miss Thompson might be surprised to find my therapeutic music of choice was Gothic metal. And now I have an excellent relationship with the world-class surgeons and staff who use cutting-edge technologies. Now, I don't don't seem like the poster child to speak about emotion, do I? I dress nicely today, but most of the time I would wear comic book t-shirts and cargo shorts. I have a lot of tattoos and curse more than I probably should. My car is covered with Iron Maiden Philadelphia Flyer stickers, and I have a really fun vanity plate. But it was there at Mount Vernon that I remember waking up. I had no idea that injuries of this type could happen to someone like me. And worse, how complicated recovery would be. I suffered so much fear, a wall of emotion. I couldn't feel or move my left side. I had double vision. Sitting up was impossible even with help. Standing a faraway goal. Looking back, I wish I wasn't so difficult to my first therapist. I was frustrated. I was exhausted. I was angry. It blocked my responses to those therapists. I could not hear that I needed to work with speech therapists. I could speak, I could think. I was just hurt. The fact that my accident resulted in more than a TBI made it complicated. I didn't want to think about the potential neurological issues. I just needed to get back to the rest of life, what it was. I was Atlas before my accident, so surely I could take on the world again. It was a roller coaster of emotion, both deeply committed to recovery and extremely unprepared for the work to be done. Each and every one of you has a patient who works hard like me. Also, you have unmotivated, terrified patients who you wish would just do it mentality. Well, emotion is universal. Every human being experiences a full range of emotions. Robert Polchik's theory is that there are 8: fear, anger, sadness, joy, disgust, surprise, trust, anticipation. I understand feelings. Cognitive behavioral therapy was a tool for me during and after the accident. At the start, I felt all the negative emotions. I argued, I pushed back, I cried, I fought, and I argued some more. But I'd like you to think about something completely different. If everyone has emotions, then they are an equalizer. Well or sick, man or woman, adult or child. Everyone's emotions everyone's emotions cannot and should not be trivialized. As strong as my emotions were, the most profound effect was the emotions of others. The emotions and actions of the clinicians, your emotions, mattered in your patient's recovery. What emotions are you presenting? How does it impact the patients? How are the patient's emotions? Can they even hear you? Is there someone whose emotions are volatile and may impact the healing environment? How did Nicholas Peter Ruklevich move from the automatic negative thoughts, or ants, to being a bright, happier, positive person? Was it magic? A little bit of magic, but it was also through CBT and a lot of hard work. But in the hospital, it was all about the motivation of others. I built the best environment around me, feeding the important work at some very wonderful people. I try my best to always show gratitude. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Don't quote me, it might be Maya Angelou. I had an occupational therapist made me feel safe and cared for. She is funny and kind and the most capable person to ever put me in sweatpants. Could not be grumpy when she was around. Now she's a friend. We've been to the park with her daughter. I was deemed a flight risk. Don't ask. What that means, when I couldn't sleep, I would talk to the night sitter. Weeks later, she was at a grocery store and recognized my voice. She is so warm and personable. Her help was non-clinical, but essential. I had physical therapists who would push me beyond my limits, but would make it fun by doing it with me or having me teach about my random useless trivia while we worked. The physical therapy plan was like a good trip to the gym instead of daily torture. Now, dinner dates with good Indian food and talk about families. I had visitors come into our room, bring me flowers, Dunkin' Donuts coffee, lots of coffee. Probably too much today, but hey. I was a teacher's pet in school, and now I had a new set of people that were there to encourage me. There are some I couldn't frown around. There are some I couldn't frown around. Their drive kept me going. But something came clear to me. Message versus messenger. Even as a staff I trusted talked, I couldn't hear their message. I had no frame of reference for rehabilitation. I remember even telling my bosses that I'd be back to work in a few weeks. So even though someone was giving me the right message, I wasn't receiving it. I was so wrapped up in the negative. Everything was hard. Clinicians would write up shorthand I didn't understand. DX, TX, SLP, TBI, and make statements such as left side negligence, impulse inhibitions, attention deficits. But the team dynamic meant I had human resources. I had a variety of supports and messengers, and not just doctors, but nurses, therapists, caseworkers, night watchers, other patients, mentors, and my own personal network. The nice thing is, whenever there's an emergency, whenever someone is hurt, whenever someone needs assistance, I always say there's 1,000 people willing to help. A friend of mine posted on Facebook, healing doesn't mean damage never existed. It just means damage no longer controls your life. More than once, I have spoken about the real life. Well, life is not a linear trajectory. Well, neither is healing. Just when you think it's great, you may find yourself at the beginning, more like an angry mule or a herd of cats. I started thinking about this slide to show pitfalls of an invisible injury, like a TBI. But honestly, everyone goes through ups and downs, befores and afters. My advice is to stay in the present. It's where joy lives, and it's contagious. In addition to your medical education, I hope this keynote will allow you to think outside the box. You have other life skills than your training in a state-of-art medical advances. A perfect surgery sometimes fails. A by-the-book therapy model may not have 100% success. Well, what are the variables? Well, the humanity. Think about your own uphill battles, from a challenge you faced with a patient earlier, something that happened in your past. Don't mess with HIPAA, of course, but you can share the patient's stories and approaches. You can describe your own steps to get over your own hurdles. You can be kind and caring and warm. Bedside manner means the difference between Indian dinners and being anonymous in halls of a hospital. Emotions have a profound impact on communication. Good communication can be the difference between success and failure. If your message isn't landing, don't assume the patient understands. Find a new novel way to use your other human resources. What techniques work well on some might not work well for all. But there were off days when the variables were interfering with me. I would look down and be very frustrated, but that meant I forgot to look behind me about how far I came. Well, fear is scary, but hope is a free medicine. Willpower can overcome fear. Today is just a day, and there is always tomorrow. There are only two paths in life, acceptance and change. And I choose change. That is why I say there is always tomorrow. That has guided me for so many years of my life. Be the change you want to see in the world. I did it in my work. I do it in my life. Couple thoughts. Well, who can be an advocate? The patient can. Nobody knows the situation better than they do. I remember always asking why when growing up. Well, maybe the TBI amplifies existing personalities. I'm definitely a talker. I can go on tangents and forget my audience. You can be an advocate for them. Ask yourself sometimes, what would you want to know? What would you fear if you were just leaving the situation? No one has all the answers. But we can use our own perspective to help lead the witness. A standard question was, do you have a home to be released from the hospital? Well, yes, but an emotionally intelligent individual also asked about accessibility of doors, wheelchairs, and space. Well, then it's time to problem solve. Well, we got a ramp, took the handrails from the wheelchair, and moved the bed in the middle of a room. Well, who else can advocate? Well, the family. Megan asked more questions than I ever thought of. And with that, it allowed me to look at the situation in a third-person view. Peer advocates. The other day, on Thursday, I was in the hospital and noticed a confused person. Sat beside her to help, texted her contacts to alert them of her status, and reached out to the hospital staff to help keep an eye on her. I just as easily could have left her alone. But we also want to advocate for you. We see you, our medical staff. We see you. I promise we do. I see you working long hours. I see you in overnights and weekend shifts. I see you accomplishing thankless tasks. I see you resetting every time you walk into a new room, after every encounter, making sure not to drag the exhaustion or the frustration into the next appointment. You are an advocate for dignity. Well, what is normal? But what is normal than a setting on a washing machine? I will say in my mentoring, it's okay to have limits. Welcome to being a human being. I felt so scared when I remember, I should drink that water. I graduated, and I was scared, very scared when I graduated. But my therapist said here, you leave here at 75%, you will get to your 100% out there. I never stopped asking and looking for more. I didn't settle for the normal. A TBI is an invisible injury. Sometimes people saying, well, you look fine. It's hard to hear when inside you are struggling. Help empower patients to control their narrative, to stop and deflect. A simple technique that I learned from an SLP that I can give freely to others. And that technique isn't just for someone in rehab, people in life. Just someone wants to say something bad, like, it's okay. Let's look at this. That way it's, sometimes the bad is hard. Well, how do you gain perspective? What stress techniques have you used to get through something? I'm sure everyone has a memory driving with the windows down singing, and you can't have anxiety if you sing. How else can a patient gain perspective when the emotions are boiling? What do you have in your toolkit, in your team, or in your office? Well, embrace support. I quoted emotion theory, but there is also early Greek definitions of rhetoric with dramatically opposing emotions. Courage is the opposite of fear. Confidence is the opposite of shame. Kindness is the opposite of cruelty. And friendship is bound of joy. Okay, so those are from Wikipedia because I don't generally quote Aristotle. But, I do quote Green Lantern in comics, and the green willpower always fights the yellow fear power. And I won't go into comic lore too much, but when the DC Comics galaxy, all creatures, all emotions have power, will, fear, anger, hope, love, and compassion. And it's just like there's inspirations in all corners. So you can't see in that first slide, but I was actually holding a comic. And it's powerful that I got to meet the author and share my story and understood the creativity that he had in the message it conveyed to me to help with my journey. To him, he was writing a story. For me, it was an outlet. People express emotions through a wide variety of works. And people can also see their emotions through creative works of all types. A simple story or song to someone is life-changing for others. But support came from some most unlikely locations. I've always set goals. We do that in intake. But it felt so small to set my therapy goals. Mine were pretty easy. It was just walk, read, type, focus. And how powerful to stand with everyone who helped me succeed and to walk up to this podium and show off my achievements. I didn't understand the importance of those goals, but looking back at them, they were amazing. I say the greatest gift from my accident is a gift of perspective. We are in a really complicated time, a complicated world, with relationships and noise all around it. I have learned that people need to be offered 3 things in life: acceptance, compassion, and forgiveness. That's all we can offer. So now you know why I shared my story. I wish to be a part of the healing community. There clearly is similar reasons that led you to this profession. And what do? Well, I smile, I open doors, I listen, I talk, I laugh, and I volunteer. Mount Vernon has a peer mentoring program run by the TR staff, where former patients come back and tell their stories. And we help answer questions. We let them know they're not alone. I remember having peer mentors while I was in the hospital and how much it helped me. Now it's my turn to make sure patients know they are not alone. The truth is, I still learn from them so much. I can't compare because comparison is a thief of joy. But I know from many stories I hear from others that they remember the compassions they receive. It's like a beacon to some. Beacon sometimes. And as I kept asking about other opportunities, I learned about the national organization, the Trauma Survivors Network, a place I could be honest and discuss hard topics in support groups, and simultaneously allow me to help others. It's hard that guilt is a feeling we get. But I have learned the help we receive is a gift you freely give. And with this experience, I can go inside the trauma unit and help show people in trauma that they have support around them, and we are here. It is one of my favorite gifts. I choose to celebrate mental health and compassion that you show in your work. And I thank you all for allowing me to share, and I hope that this focusing of the feelings will help supplement medical interventions for traumatic brain injuries and rehabilitation. And I can't thank everybody enough. I recognize faces from some. I've seen you help others in the organizations I was in, and I see some of you here now. And that means so much. So I am free to ask questions. I think I mute this. If anybody has any questions,